Yo, YouTube, GK back, and we're going to continue reading Final Fantasy X 2.5, The Price of Eternity, audio drama, the novella, goes by a few names. I think we're going to do chapter 3 and 4. I looked at it, they're pretty short, I think, however, I'm not 100% sure. And we're just going to recap up chapter 1 and chapter 2, everything that's happened so far. Titus has been feeling kind of down because he feel like he lost a step the last 2 years watching everyone grow. He's not getting the respect he deserves for being one of Yuna's guardians for that legendary journey in Final Fantasy X. We have a new character, Bria, who is like our Auron type character who has basically said he's gonna uncover the truths, and he's really interested in Titus. He saw him come in from the ocean but doesn't know from where. We have Lulu being as stern as ever, Waka being as old and dumbfounded as ever, and we have the new factions like X2 introduced the Machine Faction, the Youth League, and New Yevon. They're in power, as well as this new threat is that the old is having a problem with the youth because they're having too much fun. I guess they have too much free time, and they want to disregard the teachings of Yevon because Yevon destroyed everyone's lives for 1,000 years. But the old are still sticking to that, as not all of the teachings are bad of Yevon. Yes, and I find myself agreeing that yes, the Yevon teachings that say live a good life, work hard, be nice to each other, those are good things to follow. But the core of the teaching has been stolen, since we know it's from Xanarkand, and a lot of it is just so outdated, and the people of the state are clinging to that, so therefore they're clinging to Yuna, and Yuna is having to revert somewhat to her Final Fantasy X ways in being a little more reserved, more respectful, and being a pillar of the community. Mind you, Besaid is a small island village, so of course they would be opposed to change. Besaid has become a tourist attraction, or somewhat of, and things are changing, and Titus has noticed the change in himself as well as the world, and has looked at Yuna as a new person because her outfit is from Final Fantasy X2 kind of, but yet she's still acting the way she was because of the aforementioned things I had said. So we'll just get right into it. Take a sip of water. And here we go. Chapter 3. They had to get some fish from a boat for a banquet in Besaid, and there wasn't enough for Titus to carry, so the whole thing was trying to make himself useful to the village, kind of, just so people can see that he's useful, because I feel like they know who he is, but they don't give him they're not acknowledging him. So that's kind of where we left off. We left off with Waka reminiscing on Yevon in his childhood, and so chapter 3. There is something on the roof. The man let the women, who was pressed closely against him at the higher level of the first air duct, separate from him bluntly. Holding their breath, they kept their ears open. Once again, the same noise, as if something hard was hitting metal. The sound was coming from above and was resonating through the wall at a regular pace. Gong, gong, gong. What is it? Kush whispered. A bird, Valm answered. A gull, judging by the strength of the knocks. Evidently reassured, Kush laid down once again on the cushions, showing expressly her wish to laze about a bit more, but Valm rose up, put his light to the armor. The young girl was looking at him, adjusting the leather pieces on his chest composed of flexible muscles. How do Vos know that this is a gull? Only birds and monkeys can get up there. Thanks to the sound, I guess an animal quite big is hitting metal with a hard object. Why, imagine a monkey with a tool rather than a bird with a strong beak. In this place, there are only gulls. Vos are correct, but what does it desire? Maybe should you ask it? Yet again, vows are correct. When she was a child, Kush had been chosen to take a summoner training course. She only knew the Bavel Haven and this island. Her lack of knowledge was astounding. Here's why she came round to Valm's opinion. When they met for the first time 3 years earlier, he had thought she made fun of him. He despised her silently, convinced to deal with a too-spoiled child. Once enlightened about her personal history, he had been seized with sympathy for the young woman, and to his astonishment, his affection turned into love. Never before Kush would Valm have thought to love a summoner. These people were sensitive to fireflies, that is, the deceased. Formerly, Valm managed them ominous, obsessed with death. However, Kush, like all her comrades, felt the same emotions than the others. She was no different from Valm. Despite everything, the authorities had gathered people gifted of this talent and had created an elite corps subject to strict instructions. None of them were volunteers. Summoners were so uncommon these could not refuse. Kush and her fellows sacrificed themselves for the government. In exchange, the serenity of their close family was guaranteed. To 25 years after the death of the summoner, Kush seemed noble. She was always dressed to the nines, yet she came from a poor family, which reassured Valm, coming from the same background. He had never left the island, but his oath had rescued his kind from poverty. "I am going to go downstairs first," he declared. "The Bettles must have had enough of waiting for me. Could we not see each other without them the next time?" "Why? Do they annoy you?" "Not at all. I would like us to meet, just the both of us." "And who will support your planguin?" She laughed gently. "I can walk as well as Vos, no better." "Probably, but venomous insects introduced by the enemy have increased, and I fear that—" "Are their bites dangerous?" "Infernal," she laughed. "Oh, hell does not appeal to me at all." He knew what she was referring to. When he was a child, his grandmother was used to talking about this in the evenings. It was a place of endless throes where those who had dared defy the gods were sent, dead or alive. He who wanted to avoid it must obey his whole life. After his death, he would be reborn in the form of a flower in the other world. As a reward, hell or flowers. When he was young, Valm considered these two fates were equal, but his grandmother knew so many anecdotes to justify every rule that it was futile to question. From now on, he understood the old lady was entirely devoted to the authorities, which embodied gods in the tangible world. "Is it not possible to avoid the insects without resorting to the Bettles?" Kush asked. "Probably. I could carry you in dangerous areas." "That would be wonderful." "Great. Now dress up." He headed for the spiral staircase. In order to go down and talk to the Bettles, just before he set down his feet on the first step, he glanced behind his shoulder. Kush had stood up straight to look at the outside through the opening. Her body was slim as the one of the goddess Lushira, except for her hips, which were rounder. Valm was nearly surprised she did not have wings. The delicate item of clothing she had put on had slipped, which revealing the mark ornamenting her lower back. On the right, an adorable heart-shaped mark. "There is something at the water's edge," Kush whispered. A rush to her side, the moonlight was allowing them to make out the details of the landscape. "Over yonder, on the pontoon." A young man was standing near a shabby boat which was rocking with the waves. A refugee, Valm thought. But why sneak inside the island? This is suicide. Without taking his eyes off the unknown person, he hurried to dress her up. Then he raised his forefinger and his thumb to his mouth in order to call the Bettles, but it was not the time to whistle. The man, apparently nervous, was unloading a bag from the boat. After a moment of struggling to unknot it, he brought out a round object, a ball. The unknown person put the ball before him. Valm did not know what to think. He understood that a refugee might have drifted to the island, but what did he intend to do? Play? It was absurd. The man turned in the direction of the tower and raised his eyes to heaven. A ruse. He knows I am gazing at him. With a nonchalant step, he moved away from the ball. He was a good actor, Valm had to admit it. "That is a bomb," he cried out. He took Kush by the waist, snatched her away from the window, and pushed her against the pillar in the middle of the room. He was pulling her down the stairs when the device exploded. Valm lost his balance. Instinctively, he held the head of the young girl against his chest. His back hit the angle of the stairs, and he let out a whine of pain. The back of his head bounced on the hard surface. He recognized the smell of gunpowder. He was going to faint. He could not avoid it, but as soon as he would regain consciousness, he would go kill the murderer. He would not let this island fall into the hands of the heretic mage. That was the end of chapter 4. Okay, so I think this deserves some explaining. So from what I'm gathering is that there's a parallel, right? Xanarkand as Titus knows it, and Xanarkand as Spirit knows it, right? So this chapter 3 opens up with our new characters, Kush, Vals, the Bettles, which I think the Bettles, from knowing a lot about the lore of Final Fantasy X, is what the Al-Bhed are, right? The Al-Bhed were 2 different tribes. I believe it was the Bettles and this other tribe that must start with A or something. I'm not 100% sure at the moment. But I think those 2 tribes get so torn up in the war that they form one and become the Al-Bhed. So I'm pretty sure that's what that is. Now, Kush is the summoner, right? She and it says that the summoners are forced to do the work so that their families aren't, tortured. They're left in peace, which kind of sucks. So I'm not sure yet if they're on the side of Xanarkand or if they're on the side of Bevel or some other third-party side. Obviously, the Bettles are involved because they know how to deal with the insects that the enemy brought. I need to think. I believe that enemy could be Bevel. So therefore, the Bettles were on the side of Xanarkand in the war. Hence why they're so hated by Bevel in Final Fantasy X. So I'm thinking, and I'm thinking summoners came from Xanarkand initially because Yunalesca became that first summoner. So I believe that now Kush, talking through this, Kush and Vals are from Xanarkand. So this is very interesting. So back to that parallel thing. So they're on a boat, and the island that they're talking about has to be Besaid, right? Because they see a man playing with the ball. That man's got to be Titus. Now, Titus can move between realms, right? He can go to old Xanarkand, kind of old, or the spirit realm Xanarkand, and he can exist in spirit. The only other people to do that are really Auron, Yunalesca. There's only a few in the game who can actually do that. So they must be talking about Titus, and that the ball, it's not it to Titus it might look like a blitz ball, right? Now it makes so much more sense. It's not that whole dumb thing people were dumbing down. To Titus it might look like a blitz ball, but to these people in this wartime, right? It's actually a bomb. And that must be due to the phase shifting, like a firefly changes its shape, right? It must have something to do with the transference of the planes that Titus can exist on. So that's very interesting. So we might have a clue as to this war might have been taking place at the time of Titus, whereas that Xanarkand, it was an illusion Xanarkand, but on that same timeline when the illusion was created in the future, right after Xanarkand got destroyed. But there was an original timeline for Spira that the Xanarkand existed on, and these people, Valm and Vals, they live on that with the Bettles. So I'm thinking, so Xanarkand and Spira are on one timeline. Titus's Xanarkand is something wholly different. It could be that Titus's real self is actually Shuyin, whereas Len isn't Yuna, right? Because that's not how that would work. Because Yuna is from the real Spira, but Titus could be is a representation. So that's where they have the Shuyin character come in, huh? It's very interesting. I'm thoroughly intrigued at the moment. And yes, chapter 4 is rather short, so we'll continue here. So chapter 4. Oh, well, before I wanted to talk about why the blitzball came into play is because Titus had played some blitzball with the Aurochs, and they were practicing. So that's where the ball can come into kind of play. And if Besaid was an island of war or there was refugees, there's no reason to doubt that there would be bombs, landmines, what have you, in the area. So it makes a lot more sense now. I never got it before, but now I definitely do. What else? The gull, right? You get the little callback, the gull wings. Titus had met the gull wings, and they talk about a gull. I thought that's how you do fan service, right? That's a nice little touch that really brings things nicely. But let's just get right to chapter 4, see where they're going, because we've left apparently the timeline of where we had started with the first 2 chapters, and now we have kind of a mirage thing happening where Titus can cross planes. All right, chapter 4. The Celsius was ripping slowly through the night air. It could not fly more slowly, else it would have run the risk of stalling and crashing. Inside the cockpit, Payne was listening to Riku's, brothers, and Buddy's conversation. At this point, before his monitor, Shinra was turning his back to his comrades, focused on the task. Maybe he was making essential calculations for the flight, or maybe he was killing time with a puzzle. Behind his glasses and his mask, his facial expression remained inscrutable. "Is the storm approaching?" Payne asked as she took advantage of a pause in the conversation. The Albed, who expressed themselves in a different language from hers, spoke too fast, and she did not understand half of their conversations. Riku was keeping a close watch on the radar. "A huge depression is approaching Besaid on the south," she announced. "It is going to blow hard. We must inform them of this." "The radio does not work," Shinra answered, detached. Brother yelled, but the pilot contented himself with a shrug. "It's working less and less, and not only with Besaid. Why?" "I do not know. I am just a kid, The boy sometimes seemed annoying, but nobody knew machines better than him. Payne held him in high regard thanks to his skills, quite the opposite of Brother, who poured out ranting. Payne did not know what their leader was saying, but his shouts and his gesticulations were irritating her at the highest point. "In this case," she began. Nobody listened to her. "Shut up," she yelled. Brother stopped brusquely, standing in a ridiculous posture. "Yes? Should we not try to reach Besaid before the storm? The village is made of Hassan. We have to inform them of this." "If the wind takes the tents, the inhabitants will lose everything," Riku acquiesced. Brother seemed about ready to cry. They had left Besaid at top speed like thieves in the night. They had nowhere to go, but Buddy had preferred not to let their leader too close to the lovebirds, Yuna and Titus. "After all, this is just a storm," Payne reconsidered. "The inhabitants have overcome worse situations." Their leader was pathetic. Nobody respected him. "You think so?" Riku asked. "According to the radar..." "Oh, it went off." She may have had better days," Shinra declared. "End of the road for her. After all, this is a millenary device. A breakdown is non-sensational." "Can you not build a new one?" "Let me think." "Why not? After all, the Albed are all comfortable with machines, but we only know how to use them, of course. In order to exhume them, figure out their function, recondition them, and understand how to operate them, we have developed knowledge and a certain dexterity, but we cannot build new ones. Sometimes I wonder why. Don't you find that strange? Even though Yevon loathed them, we have contributed to their use, but we have not retained a single plan in order to build them. Admittedly, we rediscover some rules and forms of calculation, but only when it is necessary. Our ancestors have left nothing. Why? Here resides the greatest mystery of all of Albed." That was the end of chapter 4. Sorry about some of those misreadings and those word pronunciations. A lot of the sentence structure is disjointed, this is a translation, and the direct translation to English is hard, first of all, but a lot of the sentence structure isn't very clear, and obviously typos, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of words, whereas like it should be a he or a she, and there's stuff missing. So sometimes I stutter and pause. It's only because of that. But okay, so chapter 4 kicks us off right back to the Gullwings after they left Besaid, if you can recall from chapter 2. And now we're getting to some really juicy stuff about stuff we know about, excluding from chapter 3. The Al Bhed don't know how to make the machines. They only know how to use them. That's very, very interesting. It's almost like they're inherently good at using machines, but nothing in the culture of the Al Bhed has been passed down to them. That makes me believe that the Bedouins might have been the makers of machines, while the other side of Al Bhed, the Al side, which we don't know that yet, but there is 2 factions that make up the Al Bhed, they might have been the makers. and because it was 2 different tribes, right? So it would make sense if one were the users and one were the makers. But I like that question. But we have some ominous, things luring about in the air. All the communications are kind of going down, insinuating that there is some kind of culmination of interference. We don't know who's making that, but we can kind of assume that this ship with the Kush and Kaus might have something to do with that, and how they've been able to cross planes kind of and notice just Titus and notice the ship. They don't mention any other people. They only actually mention Titus, which was interesting, as I don't know if Titus was necessarily the only one in the general vicinity, or maybe he was the only one at the dock at the time. But it is strange that they only notice him. It's kind of, I like Shinra as a character. I've always kind of liked him, and he brings up a nice philosophical question there. I almost had wished they brought that up in the game. That would have been really cool. But I like how they brought it up here. It's just they left nothing to them, so that it's very strange. And they're kind of debating what to do with Besaid. I mean, on the one hand, they're free roaming pirates, so to speak. They take sphere grids. Do they really have a duty to go back to Besaid and tell him that a storm is coming? But the idea is that this isn't a normal storm. So that's kind of why Pain is like first to be like, shouldn't we go or anything? No mention of Yuna there, except for Eunice and Titus, and how brothers basically jealous of that, because it doesn't come right out and say it. What he does, he just wanted to stay away from the lovebirds. But he does love Yuna, which was apparent in FFX2. So obviously he doesn't want to be next to his competition with her. He's Yuna's not there, so he's already kind of pissy. So that's kind of funny, the little banter. You can almost picture him being there, just all angry. But those are 2 little short chapters that I decided to combine. Chapter 5 seems like its own episode, so is 6. We'll probably combine 7 and... We'll maybe combine 6 and 7. Leave 5 how it is. And there's just so much more to read. I'm just so excited. We got many episodes. I'm so excited. I just want to keep reading, but I'm holding back for you guys to keep making the videos, and we can talk about it and everything. But let me know your thoughts. Do you think there's a reason why the Al Bhed have left nothing down in terms of how to make machina, but only how to use them? I think what I came up with, it might be pretty spot on. However, I've not read ahead. I've watched very brief overviews of all this, and I've already kind of dispelled that whole it's a bomb thing already, and I'm so happy about that. I almost want to make a separate video just explaining the bomb, even though we haven't really gotten to that part yet where Titus dies by the bomb. But this prelude to that event, about that it's not a ball, it's a bomb, and how it's actually it's like a time rift, a shift, a phase, like I was talking about, that to Titus it looked like a ball, but to Kush and the people of the 1,000-year-old war in Xanarkand, from that time, it's not a ball at all, it's a bomb. It makes so much sense, and I think it's actually quite ingenious to do, because it almost sets, what I'm saying, to the layman, to the hater, to the person who doesn't know how to read between the lines, and to the regular fan who, what I'm saying, like Titus is the dumb character, quote unquote. What I'm saying? It plays with that. It's so witty. And and now it's fully explained to me. It's not actually. It's a phase, a firefly trick almost. You could kind of say it's an illusion that the island of Besaid is in a flux at this time, right? For some reason we don't know yet, but you got to picture that maybe Titus's Zanarkand. Yes, it's a singular event construct by the faith, but the whole timeline of Spira originally, excluding the construct, right, has a timeline. And if Xander can be made with that kind of faith idea, then why can't a summoner in essence make an area a temporal mirage almost, right? Come to life and bleed through reality, especially for a character like Titus. Now, I don't know if that applies to the other characters that we know, but we know Titus is able to and do that, and clearly in this novella, he's aware, maybe not consciously aware, but unconsciously a part of that phase. I'm calling it a phase, so it makes just so much more sense. I almost want to explain it. That's how hyped I am that I figured that out, and I figured out the illusion and the metaphor and the just overall wittiness of the writer. But this has been kind of long. Let me know what you think about my idea with the bomb, even though it hasn't technically gone off yet. The idea that maybe, the word beckon hasn't come up yet, but I know that will, especially from the listener to the audio drama on X2. Summoners are a lot more powerful than we know. They have temporal magics. They have all types of Final Fantasy magics throughout the series. And I think this is a case in which someone or something is messing with that and bringing to life. Now, it could be that Bria guy who said he wants to uncover the secrets, uncover what's going on. Now, Besaid has a lot of history, especially since we got that tower that we searched in the other game with Riku and Pain climbing the tower together. So Besaid might be a central place to that war, that whole thing. We don't know at this moment, if you're following with the read-through. So that could be the reason why they're doing that, or it could just be a one-off, not one. I'm sure it's all connected, but it could be just the first instance in which we have someone or something messing with the auras and spheres that surround all of Spira, that can be accessed, that you can phase through. I'm very excited. I'm GK, and have a good day.